Now, like a woman living in a remote place in Kangra could see her work being exhibited internationally. It's being exhibited in Milan and now in South Korea. And that way, I thought the problem that we were facing, like the economical problem, like unemployment and forest fires, it's been democratized now, like from designers now, and I'm not taking the sole benefit of it or like the sole responsibility of it because it's been shared. It is more democratic than
Before we dig deeper into the wonderful project that you have done, like we would love to know more about you as a person and your background.
to begin with. I was very bad at studies. I did not like it either. I just got through school, so that was my school life. But I really like making things, like things in general, not just sketching or painting. But I really like working with hands, like making stuff with paper. So there used to be this art attack show, if you know. I used to make a lot of stuff like watching that show, and
The
yeah,
one
so that was most
used to come on that Nickelodeon or some
yeah
channel, right? Like Art
Disney,
Attack.
Disney,
Disney Channel, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
So yeah, so that was like I fell in love with making stuff. It was very exciting, and it was more than just working with the pencils. I really appreciated that. Then, so my dad used to take me along, like doing a lot of house chores, like repairing stuff and working on cars and everything. That was sort of like my foundation.
Very
So
interesting.
then, yeah, so I thought like making stuff is nice, and I really like how how objects are made, how they're repaired, how they function. So I thought about like I should get into design. So yeah, so that's how I applied for NID, NIFT. Then I got selected into NIFT,
Hmm.
and I studied there for 4 years. And it was a stream called accessory design, lifestyle and accessory design. This basically product design, what it is.
Okay. But more fashion oriented, or like you covered like every aspect of product design in it?
Uh, it was the curriculum was more fashion oriented, but we had liberty of doing the things that we like to do because it wasn't a
I
strict
see.
curriculum. We were like people were open to new thoughts and ideas. So you could a lot of not just me, a lot of people got into furniture and interior, and like the fashion part of it would be jewelry and cosmetic design packaging. So yeah,
Got it.
but it wasn't really strict with the curriculum. You could do what you want. So
I
yeah,
see. Got it. So now your cheered project or cheer project like
yeah.
is exemplary in symbiotic circular design and creating circular economy, and it has won many awards and rightly so, and it's being
Hmm.
exhibited around the world right now. So maybe you could like tell us what is the cheer project and why the name cheer or cheered in the first place.
So from the start, like I
Yeah.
really hated pine needles to begin with. I did not like the material. It's really annoying to work with. It used to be really annoying to work with, and you couldn't do much with it. Like so, there was this craft. I did not even know like what pine needles were before I went to college. In
Just
fact,
to
I live in Jaipur.
give a context, like your college was in Kangra, Himachal. Like I
Yeah,
think I
yeah,
missed
yeah.
that
The
part. Yeah.
Kangra, Himachal. That so I studied in Kangra,
Yeah.
which is close to Dharamshala in Himachal Pradesh. So Himachal Pradesh is a hilly state of India
Mm.
at the foothills of Himalayas, and So there are a lot of pine trees in Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, like neighboring states. So before I went to Kangra to study there, I did not even know what pine needles were. Like it was the first time that I saw the pine forest. Like I did not go out as a child that
I
much.
see.
That was really so I used to stay at home all the time. So yeah, I went there. So you could see like first year was like no interaction, like it was just you studying like what design is. First
Mm-hmm.
year went by like that. In second year we were introduced to the native craft of Himachal. So it was called pine needle coiling craft. So what
I see.
so there were artisan communities in Himachal who were practicing these crafts, and the problem that these people were facing was like there was not much demand for their product, and it was sort of dying out because like they could not sustain themselves economically. So NIFT and the local governments of Himachal took up this initiative where design practice would be integrated with the craft practice, and these workshop like these collaborative workshops were held with these fine craftsmen and the design students, and it was an experiment to come up with something new with the craft. So that's how my story began with fine needle. So yeah, that's how I was introduced. I at first I did not really like the craft because I thought or coming from from a personal level, it's very slow for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest problem with it is that it takes a lot of hours to make anything out of it. So even an object as small as this would
Mm-hmm.
take them a day to make
So,
because it's a
do
very
they
slow
use it
craft.
like dried pine needles, or they use it like
Yeah, yeah,
semi-wet?
yeah. Dry pine needles they
Okay.
use. And they use it as a whole. So they tie them together and coil them to make anything
Okay.
like sort of circular objects out of them.
Interesting.
Uh, yeah, I mean the craft is interesting. It's just my perspective of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the biggest problem with the craft that I felt personally was like the labor put into it that is not justified by the final quality of the product, like the final outcome. So, and that I felt like if you're putting so many hours, at least there should be some form of return. Like at least there should be a certain level of gratification of you're getting
Right.
something beautiful out of it. That wasn't the
Right.
case.
I
Uh,
see.
and and yeah, and this collaborative initiative has been going on for like the past 6 years when I was first introduced to the craft. And and it has always been like the same. Like there wasn't much design integration. Like you couldn't come to a new horizon with for the craft as a student, and it wasn't just me. Like the previous batches, they couldn't really figure something out of. So that was my beginning point. Then like third year, I did not pay much attention to the craft. It was just like, okay, you need to attend this. Okay, I will attend it. That's fine.
Okay.
But then at the end of the third year, it was more like, yeah, I mean, it's a serious problem because these overabundance of pine needles cause a lot of forest fires. As you must have known, you're there right now.
Yeah.
During the summers, it's a big problem. And where I used to live in Himachal Pradesh, you could see the entire Dhauladhar mountain range, like a part of Himalayas. And you could see the forest burning from my roof. And it bothers you a lot because you're living there and you really like the forest, but you feel a certain sense of helplessness because you cannot do much about it. But like it's a natural phenomenon where you
So,
really cannot do much.
according to your research, like what were the main causes
Yeah.
of forest fires?
So any fire needs a fuel, and
Right.
pine needles are a great source of fuel because there's a compound called lignin present inside these needles. It's a form of a wax. So if you know like out from the pine wax, that comes from the tree, uh, turpentine oil is extracted from it.
I
It's
see.
also a yeah, so it's also a parallel industry that's running from the forest.
Right.
So naturally it'll catch fire at some point. And these pine needle, like the I'm talking about pine needles right now. We'll go to the fires again. So
Yeah, yeah.
to understand the root of the problem, you need to understand the material first, because the material
Right.
is at the root of the problem. Uh, and like these needles are very different from a leaf. They're not exactly a leaf, although they are called pine leaves. But how these structures are made of these leaves, they do not lose moisture that easily because they have a silicone coating, like a natural silicone coating on the top of them, and it does not allow the needles to biodegrade naturally at the pace how not natural leaves decompose. So they tend to form a bed over each other over the season rather than decomposing and going back into the soil.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so that's how you have this overabundance problem, because they will pile up rather than decompose. And they do not retain like natural moisture. So any rainwater that flows over it just washes off rather than seeping into the ground. And it also does not allow the other natural vegetation to grow. So
Got
that's
it.
like the problem. Uh, and there's not much you can do with it because you can either burn them. So there are controlled burning that take place conducted by the Himachal State Forest Department. So they clear out this forest area and they collect all of the pine within the region, and then they burn it. So that's one solution that they've come up with. And the other is that people need, like, Himachal Pradesh is still there is a lot of rural community living in that area, and they need grazing lands for the cattle. So
Right.
what they do is that they would burn forests down to clear up space for the cattle to graze on. And there's also farming that would take place, and because they need to clear the forest area, so they would want to contain the fire, but it naturally
Yeah.
erupts into something uncontrollable.
Right.
And any stray cigarette or a beady bud would light the fire, because pine needles catch fire very easily because of the dry nature. And yeah, so that's and there's another natural phenomenon is that like a lightning strike and it would burn the fire. Yeah. So there's only two forms, like natural and man-made. So man-made would be deforestation and grazing land, and natural would be like
So
lightning strikes.
there is this notion about climate change causing forest fires, but when you go to the root cause, I think human interventions are like equally responsible for these forests, at least in say like the mountain regions of Uttarakhand and Himachal, right?
That is debatable, I think,
Okay.
uh, because the pine forests of Himachal, especially, are not natural. They were planted during the British rule to get the wood for the railroads that they were producing in that area. And a lot of the natural vegetation like of Himachal was disrupted through that plantation. Uh, it's native to India, but it's not at they didn't grow at that scale.
Got it.
And climate change in climate change is more latent than we think it is, because human interaction or this human intervention is more direct and we can relate to it and we can also see it. But climate change is more, or it works at a deeper level. The rising heat and delayed monsoons prolong the
Right.
dry season.
Got it. Yeah.
And
That's
when
the other cause.
yeah, that's the other
Okay.
cause. And the rain, when it comes, it pours down. It doesn't come gradually, it just pours down. It would cause landslides and uh, like the ground cannot retain the water because you need some drizzling. And Himachal is also facing a water scarcity at this point of time because like monsoon generally turns into landslides rather than the ground water level retention. Like doesn't replenish the ground. It just landslides happen because of that.
Yeah, because I think the monsoon patterns have also become very erratic in the
Yeah,
sense like
yeah,
2-3 days of heavy rain instead of like gradual drizzling
yeah.
that used to happen. So coming back to your project, so like
Hmm.
how did it start? Like we now know that the properties of pine needles and what are the problems in Himachal. So how did
Hmm.
you go about, like the whole project and what's the story?
Uh, so I'm talking from a very conceptual point of view right now
Mm-hmm.
because what I made back then didn't really exist anywhere. There were no references. So so if you look at the craft, it's very structured. You can Google search it, right? I don't have a sample with me right now, but
Okay.
you look at the craft, it's very structured. It has a lot. The pine needle itself has a lot of structure to it. It may be free flowing, but it has a very defined structure, like and and it restricts you from going beyond that. Like the craft practice, your lack of resources living in Canada, the structure of the pine needles, the nature of pine needles, it restricts you a lot. So then I thought to myself, like, wouldn't it be great if you could just break it? If you could just break the needle.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like the beginning for me. Like, why not let's try just shredding a few pine needles. So we used to have a chili cutter with us where I used to live. So chili cutter is like a hand grinding tool where you put onions in it and chilies in it so that you
Okay.
don't sweat the onions. Yeah, it's a kitchen equipment. So I thought like I reinforced it with epoxy. I clamped it to my table and then I started shredding a bunches of pine needle. So that and then I mixed it with epoxy, put it into wooden molds, and then I got the results. Like, yeah, you can do it. It is feasible, but it's not really eco-friendly or natural or sustainable because you're using synthetic epoxy.
Mm-hmm.
But that was like the beginning of the project. Yeah,
So you took that up as a challenge or maybe as your graduate thesis project, right? If I'm
yeah,
correct.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I
So
did this at the end of third year.
I see.
So in fourth year, you're bound for your graduation project. You're bound to go work at a company for 6 months or a design house
Mm-hmm.
if that's up to your choice. But you have to intern under somebody, and it's not really an option for product design students to do an independent project. So I asked this with my faculty, Mr. Anil Tilki, great guy. So I told him like I have this project in my mind and I would want to pursue this throughout my fourth year and do it as a graduation project. How can I do it? Then he told me like it hasn't been done before, but if you could make a project proposal, you can apply to Development Commission of Handicrafts and Handloom, DC Handicrafts. It's a government body, and you can pitch this, and if they fund it, then you can do it. So, but it wasn't done before ever in my college. So mine was the first independent graduation project.
Exciting.
So yeah, so it was very hectic and painful to get it approved because I had to pursue my director to make calls to NIFT head office to find some clause in the NIFT curriculum that would help me do this project on my own. So yeah, so that's how my project got approved. And then I got funded by the government, and that's how I began this project at a bigger scale that I was initially doing. I showed them samples like the first few samples, and they were really amazed by it because it it wasn't like anything they had ever seen before, and
So the
it was
samples
really
with
thrilling.
resin that you had made.
Yeah, synthetic resin, yeah, epoxy
Yeah.
resin. So yeah, so they were really excited about it. Like, did not expect that to happen because they're administrators and they shouldn't be excited about this stuff, but it got them excited. So it was a great feedback for me because yeah.
Yeah, I can understand. So, what are the next steps? Like, once I think they approved that you should go ahead, and then how did you like go about it, and how important was it for you to like also involve the local artisans in your project?
uh, like it's always related to the craft. I
Mm-hmm.
thought to myself, like, because these people are trying to do something here, and it's of great importance because they're also fighting for the cause to reduce forest fires in their areas. That's why they practice the craft, and also for monetary reasons. Uh, so yeah, but I mean, it would be so out of context if I just come here and do whatever I want
Mm-hmm.
without any foundation. Then it would be so. It would leave everything like stranded and loose ended because you need some grounding while you're pursuing the project. Either a brief or some limitation, some sort of way that binds your ideas to a certain area.
Right.
So that's why I thought like it would be so nice if I could give back to the community and help them do what they're trying to do with and bringing a fresh perspective to the craft practice. So that's how I started working with those, and I started working with them before I did the graduation project because then I asked them a lot of questions. I sat there, I looked, even though I did not like the craft, but I was interested in this because I saw I saw these people putting in so much labor, and it was really, I mean, you could relate to it because I am somebody who likes working with hands, and I would appreciate handwork. So yeah, so that's how I came to know like what they're trying to do, why are they doing it, how is it important what they're doing. It made me relate to their cause, and that's how I just wanted to work with these people once I was more independent and not bound by the curriculum. So yeah, so then I started working. Once my project was approved, I did not have a natural binder. So that was another stress for me because I needed to come up with something. So yeah, so I started researching and talking to a lot of local people and talking to these artisans. I did a lot of interviews and field studies with them, and so yeah, so they told me like they use this binder called lei. So they use it to make glue for the posters that they put up, or like it's used as a local glue. So I thought yeah,
So,
that would be nice. So I yeah,
what is lei actually for the listeners who might not know lei?
lei is a binder made out of like wheat and corn.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a mixture of those. So you have to cook it, and then it becomes a glue sort of a thing.
Yeah,
It's natural, yeah. It's completely natural, and so I thought like it would be nice if I could make something, mix it in the fine fibers that I've extracted and make something out of it. So I did a lot of back and forth with this, and it was I did experimented with it for 2 months, about 2 months I think, and then I was at a dead end because you couldn't do much with it because it used to stick with every mold that I made, and it didn't really work exactly the way I wanted it to. That was really frustrating for me. So then I thought like it would be, I sought inspiration from other craft practices. So the biggest help came from clay work. They're working with terracotta, that is also native to Himachal, and Andretta pottery to be
I
specific.
see the village and Reta that
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
work with.
Andretta pottery to be specific. And
Okay,
so, so as I went, like my one of my friends is into clay work, and she was interning there at that point in
I
time.
see.
So I went with her, saw how they work, once you mix this glue with pine fiber, it becomes similar to how a clay block reacts, clay reacts. They share similar properties. So I thought, so there's this process in clay work called slab working. You would roll this block of clay into a slab and then cut it and work it that way. So I brought that idea into what I was doing. So I would roll this material into sheets and then work with it further. So I had to develop my own way of working it because there was no reference. Or so yeah, that's how I started working. And then it started turning out to be more manageable that way, and I could really started to make things out of it. After that, once I was more confident in the material, once I sorted out the entire process of working with it, I conducted a workshop with the craftswomen who were working with the pine needle craft. Uh, there were 22 in total, and it was a month-long workshop with them. So there, and me and a couple of my friends, we showed them what we were doing, and we taught them what we were doing, and with them we built our design collection that you have to present at the end of the year. So yeah, so it was really nice, like when we conducted this workshop, because these people have been working with the same material for the past at least 10 years now, and it was so nice to see new light in their eye with the same material that they've been working with. And at first they were really skeptic, like what are you doing with it? But yeah, it grew up with them. Like
So how did you develop that, mutual trust and mutual respect so that they agreed and like, wanted to try your idea of how to go about the pine needles?
uh, like I said, I have been like going back and forth with these people before I even started working on
I
this
see.
project. So I have known a lot of them before I even
Got it.
got into Cheer Project. Yeah, so that's how they knew me personally before they knew what I do and what I want to do
Okay.
with the material. So, but not all of them, not everybody was very trusty of what I was doing, because so they have known this material for a long time. They've been doing this for a long time now. And it's really hard to change direction when you're older, and when you, like, it's uncharted territory, like it hasn't been mapped before. So it was hard. Like before this workshop, I was continuously in conversation with the people, with the craftspeople for a month and a half before I even conducted the workshop, because there's a formality to it, because you need to get their personal details, their ID proofs, and their bank details to go about this funding that I had taken up from the government. It was mandatory, an obligation for me to do it.
Got it.
Yeah, so in that process we collected people. So we collected 22 people who would want to be a part of this workshop. Of course, there was financial incentive for them, so they wouldn't feel empty-handed at the end of the workshop. Uh, so yeah, at first, the first couple of weeks like were very tough, because like, they to get them to understand what we are doing and to understand the process and to help them build the skill of working with the material. Uh, so yeah, after the second week, like they started getting a hold of it, and then they were doing things better than what I was doing at first alone.
I see.
So then I felt like it is so nice, like you could achieve more with more people, and it's a shared experience that way. It becomes more whole that way. And I thought like it is a nice thing that I'm trying to do here. That was like
So
a
what all ingredients, like what was the final mix of ingredients, like if you want to share, like uh, what is the mixture of selai and clay and pine?
yeah. So I don't use clay.
I
Clay
see.
is just an inspiration. Yeah.
Okay.
So Lay right now what I use is not exactly lay anymore. So I have made changes to the
Got it.
mixture according to my need. And I cannot really talk more
Yeah,
about it because I'm in the
got it.
process
Yeah,
of
yeah.
patenting it. Yeah.
But when I
So
read about Lai, when you mentioned Lai, that reminded me of
yeah,
the days like I remember like when we were like school kids. My grandmother used to make that mixture, and we used to like bind our covers for the notebooks with Lai. So that is
yeah,
something
it
I
used to.
actually read about it like after say like ages about something like that, which already exists in our Indian culture
Yeah,
where like
yeah.
indigenous people have been using it for a long time.
That's been the entire process of Cheer Project because it has been so wonderful rediscovering things, right?
Yes,
Because it's been embedded in us for a long time now.
right.
It's been this knowledge, and it's like you're just trying to rediscover it that way. And and it has been so serendipitous because I did not even know I would use lay to make such things. I have known about it since my childhood, but you cannot. I did not think about it back then. And
Right.
even now, it feels like it felt like a flash of genius. Like it was an otherworldly experience when you're doing it because Gaurav Wali, wouldn't think about doing such stuff. It just happened.
Got it.
Yeah, so because it's you're rediscovering pine, you're rediscovering local cultures, you're rediscovering your relationships with people, you're rediscovering yourself, like the knowledge you've had. Uh, it's been amazing that way. It made me like a designer that I've always wanted to be, and not in a way like yeah. Like when I was working with pine, like shredding was the biggest problem that could not be mechanized because I did not have the resources to do so at that time, and it was really slow. That was holding me back, like the shredding.
Mhm.
The rest were sort of like you could do it faster. Uh, so first I started with some kitchen equipment like a blender and like hand slicing tools. And then I started and moved up to farm equipment because one of my friend's landlord had a stag cutter, like a fodder cutter
Mhm.
for feeding the cattle. So I started wanted to shred needles, and then his landlord helped me with it. Then the results were not exactly what I wanted, but it made the needles smaller, so they were easier to process in a blender and a hand cutter. So I worked that way. And you would want to pick up needles that were broken down by the cars when you go out picking up. Now, earlier it was because they pile up by the side of the road,
Mhm.
and when cars move on them, so they over time break down into fibers themselves. So you would want to pick that fiber when you go out picking needles at first. Now it's not really a problem anymore. Uh, so that's how I started. Then I came across a project called Precious Plastic by Dutch
Okay.
designer Dave Hawkins. Yeah. So there he was trying to grassroots, like he produced this project as a grassroots solution to the plastic problem, and he would want it to help these people around the world by building open source machinery that would help them recycle plastic at their homes. So one of those machineries were a shredder. So he used that shredder, that open source shredder, for shredding plastic. But I thought like it would be nice if I could just make this for this project. And so yeah, so I took that plan, made some adjustments to it to make it fit my needs, and then I built that shredder, and then I started shredding needles through that. So that was like a big leap because you could
So
process a lot
how
more needles. And
how easy was the process, and like did you always have interest in making these small kind of machines, or was it something you were also doing first time?
it was the first time that I was doing machine. I have known machines. I understand machinery because my dad's a mechanic.
Mhm.
So I have been around machines recently, but I hadn't really built anything. That's like a different ball game altogether when you're trying to build things. Even though I had the plans for the shredder, but you had to make some adjustments because there were different tolerances when you're working with needles or when you work with plastic. So you needed to adjust that. And the biggest problem was I was living in a very remote place
Mhm.
in Himachal. Kangra is quite remote that way because you could get the things of necessity, but you do not get a laser cutter there that could cut
Right.
metal.
Right.
So I had to get this machine parts cut in Delhi, and then I got them shipped to Himachal. And then it was assembled here. The motors and everything were sourced from Kangra, and then it was all put together in Kangra, and I started using that for the project. So that really helped me mechanize the process, and I could process a lot more needles uh, now than I could before working with that.
Got it. Now coming back to the workshop, so what was the end result of those, say, like a month-long workshop, as you mentioned, and what was the impact created?
They could see their own craft, like the crafts women could see their own craft in a new light. It was a shift in perspective. It's not really something tangible, of course, like,
Mhm.
but it was a shift. They could see new potential in the material they've known for years, and it was a new set of skills. Uh, they could continue on even after the workshop was over. So, and a lot more people contacted me after that. Like I still work with them on a project basis. I do not have a, like a workshop set up at Himachal, but I go to Himachal regularly for projects that I take up. And so yeah, so I mean, now that I look back, and I went back like lately, like a couple of months back before the lockdown. It was really nice. Like I could show them where their works are because I built my design collection, the one that you see on my website and my Behance. So I built that project with them, and they could see their work being appreciated internationally, and it was very nice that way because they didn't really imagine their work. Now a remote, like a woman living in a remote place in Kangra could see her work being exhibited internationally. It's being exhibited in Milan and now in South Korea. And that way I thought the problem that we were facing, like the economical problem, like unemployment and forest fires, it's been democratized now, like from designers. And I'm not taking the sole benefit of it or like the sole responsibility of it because it's been shared. It is more democratic that way. It's a democratic solution, like democratizing the design process altogether because you're working with these people from shoulder to shoulder. And so yeah, so it's been interesting that way because most design things, like for a designer, it's more egocentric that way. How one designer can change everything, how one architect can change everything. I do not like it that much because like the entire production process is ambiguous. What you see is just the design. I do not like that idea. I would want to show it to people. I would want to people, and people themselves are more interested in stories. People don't buy products anymore. People buy stories.
The
People buy
stories.
experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally
So
resonate with you. Like even say like as architects, like there's this tendency of maybe inflating our ego and sometimes keeping ourselves on a pedestal and like
yeah,
others are not like the main people who are actually helping you construct your dream. You don't even know
yeah,
their name. There is this big disconnect,
yeah,
and that that whole identity of a corporate architect like going, and same with like other
yeah,
design fields. So like what you created was indeed a symbiotic circular economy, and like while involving so many other stakeholders, and I'm sure like it would have been like a very empowering experience for the local community as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was so, it resonated very fast with them because people who weren't even a part of the workshop officially really wanted to come and see what is happening here, and it was so
Right.
nice to see. Like it was like a small village called Red, and the women around would come and see what we were doing, and they were like, it was more like a festival there when we were working over there for a month. People would come around and just look at what we were doing, and they would see, and then some would like it, some would not, some would comment on it, but it kept the environment more energetic and lively that way. And it and for a woman living in Red, it's more like either you work in the kitchen or you watch the clothes or you go in the field and cut some crops, and that's about it. But this month long workshop was more like a new social gathering for them because they helped them connect with new people. And she had and a woman living there, she had something else to do apart from the housework. It was more interesting that way for her to spend the time that she has on her hand. And of course, there was a monetary incentive for them to participate. They enjoyed the work more than what they were getting paid for.
Got it. Great. So coming back to the material itself, like what were some of the properties of the of the final prototype that you achieved?
So I had one thing in mind. I want to keep it completely natural. So that was like one foundation that I put on myself. And whatever products I build in my design collection, I want them to be completely made out of.
Hmm.
So once I had developed this material, I started testing it. So it turned out to be water resistant. So it once because after the wax infusion process, the material becomes water resistant, and it wasn't waterproof, of course.
Yeah.
But it repelled whatever splashes of water you put on it, and it was sound dampening. So it dampens the sound, and it could act as more. It had more acoustic properties, and it was the biggest surprise. Was it was fire retardant. Like I put it on open flame, and it does not catch fire like at all. Sometimes, uh,
Interesting.
but whatever it catches, it just like the fire go simmers down very easily on this material. Like it doesn't catch fire like natural pine needle does. But when I told this to people, they were pretty amazed because like you're working with a problem that is the source of the fire, but it's now a fire retardant material.
Right.
So that way, it was really all of these things I figured out later. I did not aim for them, but they just turned out to be what they are.
Yeah, super fascinating. So, what are some applications of this material? Like, I'm sure, like, apart from, like, I would love to know, like, what design collection you created, and I'm sure there are other applications also possible
Yeah.
with that material.
So one thing I had on my mind that I couldn't execute during my graduation project was packaging. Like packaging is a big avenue for this material because it is natural, it is biodegradable, and it has a smaller carbon footprint than plastics, petrochemicals, and yeah, I mean, I am still trying to get something out of it because it has its own limitation, the material, so it's not applicable everywhere. But for packaging, I would want to explore it further. And I mean, you could make pretty much everything out of this. Like if you are thinking of in packaging manner, and once you're talking about like raw material, like board, or you're talking like you have MDF boards or plywood, if you could replace that, if this could be formed and made into different panels in a car, or if it could be introduced as a new material for CMF designing. So that way, it has like the potential is limitless, and I am bound by my resources to explore them.
Got it. So now, like, you've obviously like achieved so much success with this whole project, and this
You
is
think so? I
something.
do not think
Yeah.
so.
I mean, it's really has started an important conversation, and like you mentioned, like this
Yeah,
material is available in so many other states also. For example, if not pine needles, I'm sure like some other like similarly for
yeah,
similar material
yeah.
could be used. So do you actually see this as an open source project, or maybe not if open source, maybe decentralized, where you could also power different communities, different villages? Like, what is your vision for this project now ahead?
Um, I had thought about it from the beginning. Like it is for people in places that are facing similar problems. But yeah, I mean, COVID hit, and then I had another 6 months of time to work on this project. Then for like a year there was a lockdown, and for on and off lockdown you couldn't do much. So I am trying to build a team that could help me facilitate this project to other people. And I would want to, like, many people have approached me with the idea that I tell them how it works. I would like how much I want to help them. I would feel like it would go out of control very fast. Not control exactly, but it wouldn't be what it is. I
Right,
would want to see that happen, but right now I would want to formalize my knowledge of what I have about this material. Then I can give, I think I would be more prepared to give it to people so that they
right,
know what they're doing. It's not a shot in the dark as it has been for me. So I've been trying to build a team that would help me achieve that vision. And yeah, so that I'm trying to do that right now. So most probably, yeah, maybe next year I'll be able to give it out to people who are really trying to. One thing I've seen is that I've been approached by the forest department of Uttarakhand to help them work with this material, but then another lockdown, then the plan got delayed. So yeah, so a lot of things have been hanging because of like this COVID. So yeah.
yeah, fair enough. So, like, while researching for your own material and also exhibiting in such esteemed exhibitions, I'm sure
Hmm.
you might have also come across other biomaterials. So, I would
Yeah.
like to know, like, what are some other biomaterials or some projects that really fascinated you, or you want to, like, also pick them up as your next projects, or explore or experiment?
Like Precious Plastic by Dave Hawkins is like an inspiration. Like it was the inspiration that got me going in this direction.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't really fascinated with biomaterial, but once I got into it, because I have a problem with what you call as a biomaterial, because people are
Okay.
mixing plastic with like plastic with starch and making plastic bags out of it, and they're calling it biodegradable bags, but it's just microplastics. If you melt that bag into hot water, like the starch part disintegrates, but the plastic still remains. Like, There's a big there is a debate going on. People are questioning this about what is exactly a biomaterial per se. Uh, there's this Japanese designer called Kosuke Araki. He did a project back in 2017 called Anima, and
Mm-hmm.
he won the 2017 Lexus Design Award for it. His team, actually. So he's been working on it since then, and the results are really promising. And now he started to mix Japanese traditional craft
So,
modern
what is the
solutions.
project about?
It's a new material made from food waste, and so how he has made these uh, bowls and vases out of it that do not really look like food waste or any other material you've ever seen, because he's
Mm-hmm.
mixed the traditional craft of urushi with this mixture that he's made. So he would polish it into like mirror like finish. It's really nice to, and it's very different from what all everybody else is doing, and
Got
I
it.
really like that part of it. The biggest problem that I see with biomaterials is that you can make a material now. It's really feasible because a lot of people are doing it now, but what to do with it now? That's the question that I'm asking, and that everybody should be asking. What to do with it now? Because it's fine if you can make a sheet or a bowl out of it, but what exactly are you trying to make out of it? Because it's a new avenue, and like the instant gratification that you get, because once you start working with biomaterials, you'll get published in like 5 different magazines, and it doesn't excite me anymore. And it's like because it is also stopping the next step from coming in biomaterial, like the next breakthrough. What is it going to be? So yeah, so there's a page on Instagram called Natural Materials Studio. I do not really remember the name of the lady who runs it, but she is also doing some good work. Tamara Oriola, I think she's Israeli. She's an Israeli designer. She made packaging, like biodegradable packaging, out of cornstarch. No, she made it out of seaweed.
I see.
I think it's, like if you what I've observed from, because I have some experience, I can say in this field, because people are saying you're making bioplastic out of eggshells or orange peel or lemon or strawberries or uh, seaweed. So it from what I know about it's mostly cornstarch or potato starch
Hmm.
what they're making things out of.
Hmm.
So I think it's a little unfair to say like it's made out of orange. It's not really made out of orange, to be honest. So that's
Okay.
one problem that I have with it. The other,
But
I
I
would say,
think I think that is more of like a binder. Like I haven't
yeah,
tried myself using trying to make bioplastics, but we had this conversation with some other artist like 2 days back
yeah,
where she talked about her experience in creating bioplastics. So
yeah,
she also mentioned like various possibilities. But I think the whole idea people working with different materials is, I think, like these solutions could be decentralized and based on what materials you have available locally. And because you could make packaging out of the pine needles and the binder that you use, or mycelium for that matter, but again, what suits that area, what are the requirements, and also how you could involve the local community, like the conversation that you started and about working shoulder to shoulder. So how do you think the role of designers should change in the coming future if we are looking for more circular future in design specifically?
the traditional, in my opinion, like the traditional industrial design is dead as we know
Mm-hmm.
it. Dieter Rams, like the father of industrial design, has abandoned what he has thought of. He
Okay.
completely hates what he has done. He thinks it's a complete waste. In his documentary Rams, he says so. And he said, like, it was a mistake because it made everything more consumerist
Right.
than what we think. So it's like the father of product design says so, then you should know you should be looking for other options now. Now is the time. That way, right now, I think from in general terms, from a designer's perspective, we're in a transitional phase right now because what we know and understand have done their role and will not help us anymore. So you need to start looking at things that may happen, and we need visionaries and we need revolutions that would guide that vision forward. We need a clarity in that because everybody is questioning, like, but the problem with questioning is that it's a super philosophy. You can go on and on with that, but
Mm-hmm.
you need to tie yourself to stricter briefs. You need to be more specific, more clear about what you're trying to do, and ask the right questions because everybody's asking very vague questions. Because if you're not specific about the question that you're asking, you're not going to get the right answer that you're looking for. So that way, it's more burdensome for a young designer because you need to take up the responsibility of the next generation that will guide the design. And it's what we're like the second generation of design in India, I think,
Mm-hmm.
because so that way it's more pressure on us because the traditional industries have run their time and they will go out in the next 20 years. You need to look for new avenues for yourself and for and it puts a lot of burden on you, but I think it's healthy because it also catalyzes your growth process. Because once you're out there on your own, there's nothing else. Like no help, you cannot do much about it. No problems you share, people won't get them. That way, you're more into yourself. I think it's better that way because you need to internalize first before you're out there. You need to be clear about what you're trying to do, learn your craft, know about your profession, practice it, become better at it. Then you can go out and figure yourself out, figure the world out. I think it's more important that way. That is not being taught in the colleges right now, and I really hate it
Hmm.
because once I've come out, now I come to realize and understand what I'm meant to do. That way, the curriculums are way behind in India specifically. uh, as a zeitgeist, it's way behind
Hmm.
than what the world is doing because we're still thinking about furniture. We're still thinking about, oh my god, it would look so pretty in pink, and oh my god,
Right.
I do not want that color of shade of blue.
So this
And we're
one of
following trends. It's so annoying that way
yeah.
because it is enforcing WGSN like these trend postcards magazines on students to follow these trends, and it's just annoying. It's just plain annoying. I never opened a WGSN and thought to myself, "Oh my god, I feel so inspired." Like that's
So
my
in
opinion on it.
in one of our conversations with one of our friends who also came on
Yeah,
our podcast, so she brought this really important point that today's design, especially for the young graduates, it's like very much driven by the algorithm that we see on Instagram or Pinterest, and the whole conversation is mostly based on the aesthetics, how it looks, and rarely we do talk about materials and life cycle of materials, how it is being sourced and how is its life cycle would end. So how important is for today's designer to talk about the complete life cycle of a material or the complete life cycle of a product?
I think in this day and age, it's really hard to avoid it now. But we are way in over our heads with computers and technology because you can thought of any crazy idea that you can think of and make it in a 3D model into a 3D model through whatever software you like on the computer. But in reality, things are very different. There are limitations to a material. There are limitations to a certain circumstance or a situation that you cannot achieve the things you want to achieve. And with computer, it's limitless. And it's like you can make anything look perfect. The reality is far from it. Reality is as imperfect as you can think of. And it is and it's like I hate that the brushing over the corners and hiding things behind a 2D wall. I do not appreciate it. I am somebody who works with hand and really appreciates the craftsmanship. And once you're working with hands, you're in touch with what you're making, your creation. You can touch it. It's a very tangible thing what you're doing.
Right.
Even working, making prototypes out of it. It's a very engaging process that way,
Do
and
you
it
think
gives you a
it's
lot of
it's
feedback.
more of a spiritual process also, and most
Yeah.
designers are devoid of it right now, and they feel little disconnected with their design?
I mean, it's a choice
Mm-hmm.
that they're making because it's easier to make things on a computer than to make things out of hand. And it is a slower process economically. It's not going to work out. Industry moves at a way faster pace. Oki Sato, the designer I admire the most in the world, is making 400 projects a year. That is beyond fathomable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but where would you go? You'll tire yourself out in 20 years if you do that. Tire this entire world out in 20 years if you do that. Being more conscientious, being more thoughtful, being more mindful of what you're trying to do, what you're trying to create, and the impact that it will have over the next, like the like the like consequentially what will come out of it. That is not being taught. That is not being thought after. If you have read it somewhere, you're blessed. Because once I read the book Designing Design by Kenya Hara, my life had changed
I
completely.
see.
It's a wonderful book. I would recommend it to any student out there. It will leave you out into the unknown. That I will guarantee if you read it with your heart. Because it will strip you off of everything that you have known. And it will lead you into completely in an area that is completely unknown. But that is important. You're challenging yourself. You're young, you're a student, there are no consequences to your actions, and this is the best time to experiment. This is the best time to go out and just throw everything you've got into your efforts, into your design work. People want children, like even my classmates wanted, my seniors, my classmates, my juniors wanted to play it safe to get a better job. The industry is going to die in 20 years as we know it.
Hmm.
That I can tell you. It is going to come to an end at some point because it has run its course. Like everything, like even when you if you go by the trend report thing, everything has a peak, a plateau, and then it would go down. So it's plateauing right now, and in 20 it would go down. You need
So,
a change in vision is needed.
got it. But are you personally optimistic about the future?
Yes, very, because if 100 things are being tried, only 10 are going to work out. But it's really important to try those 100 things. I got into biomaterials of from a for a very different reason. Like in 4 years, I couldn't picture like at the beginning of my college I would be doing this. I had thought to myself like I could see these people on Instagram, like people my age, people younger to me, people a little older to me, getting these awards, being published in magazines. So it was like a huge, I would say, it has sort of acted like a negative incentive for me because it made me feel a lot lesser of a designer than I was. I wasn't even a designer at that point. I was a student. But yeah, it made me feel a lot less like I have less talent, I have less exposure, I come from a very backward place. But it made me work harder. And I thought to myself, like, by the time I graduate, I need an award, I need an exhibition, I need to publish in magazine, I need to have a few interviews by the time I'm out. But I couldn't do any of it until I got out. But that thought, that idea made me work hard to question everything I know, to work longer than anybody I know. And you need to tie yourself to higher goals that way. I think personally, from my experience, I can say it's very anxiety provoking. It makes you very pressurized at some point, but it really catalyzes your growth, I can tell you. I was burned out by the time I graduated, but it made me a man. Like made a man out of me, I could say. It made me think better, work faster, more efficiently. It made me a more clear thinker. I did not achieve any like a big lot in my college, but it made me a better designer, better person in general. That is what happens when you tie yourself to a higher goal. You may not get there. I did not get there by the time I graduated. I only got it when I graduated. But it made me a portfolio that was different than anybody I know
Yeah,
back then.
I can totally understand what you're saying.
And it's hard, and it's very important to compete that way and healthily compete to work. Like, yeah, so what you were saying.
Yeah, so I mean, Gaurav, man, your story, both your project and your story has been like really inspirational, and this whole talk has been very like insightful and enlightening for me personally. I got introduced to new things, new projects that you talked about, and a whole new approach. And I really appreciate you sharing all these stuff and like new nuances of what went into your design.